Part 71. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 703. Chi Heiran ran to the Imperial College on horseback. Everyone was wondering, and they heard him ask aggressively, "Where is Grand Tutor Lu?" The people from the Kuazajian hurriedly said, "The Taifu is teaching the eldest prince today, and he is still in the palace at this time." Chi Heiran sneered, "The literary class is in the morning, but it has been delayed until now in the palace. It can be seen that Mr. Lu's efficiency is low, maybe the name is not worthy of the name." People from the Imperial College did not dare to refute, everyone did not know how Taifu Lu provoked Chi Heiran. But the people who came secretly were very puzzled. Could it be that the quarrel between King Rongjun and the princess was because of Mrs. Lu? But Taifu Lu is 50 years old this year, can't it be that the princess has taken a fancy to Taifu Lu? When everyone looked at the handsome Chi Heiran, they all shuddered and threw this speculation to the sky. As long as Princess Rongjun is not blind, this situation will not happen. However, Grand Tutor Lu and Chi Heiran also had an irreconcilable relationship, so why did they suddenly find the bad luck of Grand Tutor Lu? Before everyone could figure it out, Chi Heiran snorted coldly, turned his horse's head and headed towards the palace. Everyone was startled. Did Chi Heiran arrest someone and go to the palace? After running halfway, a guard shouted, "Master, what passed just now seems to be Mrs. Lu's carriage, with Lu's emblem on it." Chi Heiran reined in his horse, and there was only one carriage passing by just now. He stepped forward to stop it, forcing the other party to stop the carriage. Chi Heiran's guards surrounded the carriage. The coachman was so angry that he pointed at Chi Heiran with his whip and shouted, "Bold, do you know who is sitting in the carriage? Isn't it Grand Tutor Lu? Do you still expect the king to get off his horse and salute him? A small slave dares to shout and ask in the king's face." The coachman frowned slightly. Although he was a little nervous, he was not afraid. He was not an ordinary coachman, but a follower of Grand Tutor Lu. The Lu family is now the leader of the family. As the follower of the patriarch of the Lu family, he naturally has his own. Proud, like most of the children of aristocratic families, he looked down on brother Chi Ziyuan who was born with mud legs. Therefore, the coachman was respectful on the surface, but he said arrogantly on the inside, "It turns out that it is the king of Rongjun." Seeing that there was no movement in the carriage, Chi Heiran only sent a coachman to talk to him, and sneered in his heart. Being so disrespectful and rude to him, it can be seen that the tutor of the Lu family, I am afraid that the young gentleman of the Lu family will be more arrogant when he treats his son, but it is just a family. A faint light flashed in Chi Heiran's eyes. The guards behind Chi Heiran are not vegetarians either, so they naturally wouldn't let Chi Heiran argue with the coachman. Isn't this lowering the status of the prince? Therefore, a guard behind Chi Heiran scolded, "Bold, what is the Lord going to do for a servant to ask you?" Another guard looked at the carriage, and said to the people in the carriage, "Teacher Lu, is this how you greet the superior? You are only a first-rank official. When you see my prince, you not only don't get out of the carriage to pay respects, but also hide in the carriage." Could it be that Lu is everyone such a person who hides his head and shows his tail like this? Mrs. Lu in the carriage was very angry. Seeing Chi Heiran approaching aggressively, although he didn't know what had happened, he wanted to avoid his sharpness and argue after the fact, so as not to lose face in public, but seeing Chi Heiran so shameless when he brought up the matter of greeting, he had no choice but to grit his teeth and get out of the car, because he reasoned, Chi Heiran was a super prince, and he was only a first-rank prince, so he really wanted to get out of the car and salute when he saw Chi Heiran. Taifu Lu lifted the curtain and got out of the car. Chi Heiran explained, "It turned out to be King Rong, the old man is getting old, I didn't expect to fall asleep in just a short distance, and I didn't see King Rong. So it is understandable that he did not see Chi Heiran and did not get out of the car to salute." Chi Heiran sneered and said, It turns out that my lord is so leisurely. The officials of the 6 ministries are so busy spinning like a spinning top for the canonization of the crown prince and the ownership of Dolly. It is really rare that my lord can not only stroll around the streets leisurely, but also sleep on the carriage. Tefulu's face became solemn, and he said seriously, "My lord, be careful, this old man went to the palace to teach the eldest prince this morning. He just came out of the palace and was about to go to the Imperial College. The carriage was also driving fast, but he just closed his eyes and rested while taking advantage of the gap. Just for a while. The eldest prince only has literary lessons in the morning. Now that he has passed Shenzhen, Tefulu has only left the palace. It can be seen how inefficient the efficiency is. The emperor's brother chose you to teach the eldest prince not only because of your knowledge and talent, but also because of your talent. I always hear people talk about your high moral character, but now it seems that the facts and the rumors are not in line with each other. The Tai Tuo is more like a vegetarian." No matter how patient Lu Teifu was, he was irritated by the sentence. He said angrily, "King Rong, I have been working hard as the prince and Teifu, and I dare not neglect you. How dare you slander me so much? If you come up with evidence, I don't mind dragging you to the emperor to make an argument. Even if you are the emperor's younger brother, the emperor must not show favoritism. Go as soon as you go. Is it possible that the king is afraid that you will fail?" Chi Heiran said angrily. The literary class ended at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but the Teifu didn't leave the palace until the second quarter of Shenzhen. Where did he go for more than 2 hours in the middle? Being lazy. Is it possible that there is something important to do in the palace? Grand Tutor Lu choked. Could he say that he went to sit in the palace of Qinzhen? Although Grand Tutor Lu is the Crown Prince Teifu, he also holds the official position as the Secretary of the Imperial Academy, and his office is in the Imperial Academy. Every day he goes back to the Imperial Academy except for going to the palace to give lectures to the eldest prince. But at this time, Quazijian was very free. He didn't even offer sacrifices, so what was he doing when he went back? So he often went to the palace of Qinzhen where the officials on duty were, and he could get some news. Because of his status and seniority, they don't shy away from him for some documents that are not confidential, but these things are tacitly understood by everyone in private, but they can't be brought to the table, otherwise not only will he not be good, but those who are not blocked, he and the officials who allowed him to enter and exit the palace of Qinzhen will also be implicated, and they, Mrs. Lu, will offend many people by then. However, he was unwilling to get him to admit to the crime of eating vegetarian food with a dead body, so he could only remain silent. This appearance fell into the eyes of others, but it proved him to be guilty of eating nothing. The people onlookers whispered, "You are still a family, and you don't work for nothing with the money from the court. Isn't everyone in the family like this? Even King Rong is stupid enough to shout out on the spot, and he doesn't know if he will be retaliated by the family." Chi Heiran refused to let it go. He talked a lot, and then he brought up the education of the Lu family, thinking that the Lu family's younger generations were not upright, and their lower beams were crooked. The training made Grand Tutor Lu turn pale, but he still couldn't justify himself, otherwise Chi Heiran would pursue him for sitting in the Qinzhen palace, and he would not be able to escape the charge of spying on secrets. The emperor has always disliked the family, and the Kui family has been defeated. If the emperor catches him again, then the Lu family will not be able to escape. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 704. Chi Heiran scolded Mrs. Lu from his character to Mrs. Lu's tutoring character, but Mrs. Lu was almost pissed off. But a small matter, at most it was a charge of laziness, was made a fuss by Chi Heiran ordered a vegetarian meal. Grand Fu Lu gritted his teeth and stood in front of the carriage, with a gloomy look in his eyes, but he didn't say a word. Chi Heiran scolded to his heart's content, and left with a cold snort. Grand Tutor Lu didn't go back to the Imperial College anymore, and went straight to Lu's house. As soon as he entered the door, he couldn't help but smash the decorations in the house, and roared, "How dare you!" The follower who came in stood at the side with his head bowed. A cold light flashed in Lu Teifu's eyes, and he said, "Go and clean up the traces of the Kinzen Hall." I remember that Lord Wang of Guanglu Temple was also on duty in the Kinzen Hall recently. Isn't he reading the history books of the previous dynasty? Yes, the old man was entrusted by Mr. Wang to give some advice. After all, apart from Grand Tutor Yan, the old man knows the secrets of the previous dynasty best. Mrs. Lu nodded in satisfaction. Thinking of Qi Heiran's aggressiveness, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and he ordered, "Go and find out, why is King Rongjun crazy today? Also, find out about his affairs in Qianan. I will. If you don't believe it, he's clean." Although Teifu was in the palace at that time, he really didn't know what happened in Shanglai, otherwise he would know why Qi Heiran always made troubles about their Lu family's tutor, so he could fight back, because no matter how much Lu Yan know, he was also beaten by the cubs, and he was beaten badly. It can be seen from this that Qi Ziyuan has control over the palace. As long as he does not want some news to spread, the news cannot be spread. This is very different from the imperial palace that was like a sieve in the previous dynasty, so Mrs. Lu's people have spent a lot of effort to find out any news. It was because there was a commotion in the inner house, and Mrs. Lu couldn't stand the noise and asked to guess what happened. What happened? Mr. Lu Xiaolang was carried back to Lu's house by his servants. He was still young and still lived in the inner house. Mrs. Lu was shocked and angry when she saw her precious grandson become like this. She called for a doctor and burst into tears. Lu Yan was frightened by Xiao Xiong and Mu Yangling in the palace, and he recovered after being hugged and cried by Mrs. Lu. He couldn't bear the grievance in his heart. He didn't talk about scolding Xiao Xiong, but only about Rongjun Palace. The little prince beat up his cousin, and the princess came over and reprimanded him. Mrs. Lu was also very honorable all her life, even the empress had to be courteous when she saw her. When did she suffer this wrong? She was so angry that she immediately asked someone to set up a car to argue with Mu Yangling in person, but was stopped by Lu Yan's mother, Mrs. Lu. There was too much noise in the back house, which alarmed Mrs. Lu. He was in a bad mood, and became even angrier when he saw this. After asking, he found out that his grandson had been beaten in the palace. Grand Tutor Lu almost immediately thought of Qi Heiran. He was not Mrs. Lu just blindly doting on her grandson, so he said that Lu Yan came over, and asked seriously, "Why did the young prince of Rongjun want to beat you? He is only 3 years old this year, isn't he with the prince?" Lu Yan lowered his head under his grandfather's stern gaze, not daring to say a word. A faint light flashed in Lu Teifu's eyes, and his face became more and more kind. He patted Lu Yan's head and asked, "Did you quarrel with the young prince of Rongjun Palace?" With a fever on his face, Lu Yan whispered his mocking of the little bear. Grand Tutor Lu was furious, and finally understood why Qi Heiran stopped him and scolded him halfway. He co-authored with him for one purpose, and let him talk about Lu's family education. Grand Tutor Lu pointed at his grandson and was so angry that he couldn't speak, and Qi Heiran was also angry in his heart. Wasn't it just the children who were quarreling and fighting? Do you need to be so serious? But he also breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. It's just these small conflicts. Qi Heiran shouldn't hold on to him, and the matter of Kinzen Hall should be smoothed over. Qi Heiran really didn't mean to go into it. He just wanted to vent his anger and seek justice for his son, but he couldn't go to Lu Yan. He could only go to his parents. Grand Tutor Lu is the head of the family, and he is the first object of seeking justice, while the second is Lu Yan's father, Lu Ji, who is known as a talented man. Lu Ji was meeting friends in the tea house. Qi Heiran knocked on the door of the box directly. Everyone looked up at Qi Heiran. They were a little dazed. All the people present were literati. They really didn't have much friendship with Qi Heiran. I don't know why this prince came here. Soon they found out. The guard behind Chi-Heiran said with a straight face, "Why are you so rude when you see my prince?" Everyone's faces were a little bit exciting, and they hurriedly stood up and saluted. Chi-Heiran just stared at Lu Ji, and everyone followed his gaze to look at Lu Ji. The guard coughed lightly again, and said with a straight face, "Mr. Lu doesn't seem to have any fame, does he?" The guard felt that his face must be red, but he had no choice but to peel off his face and step on the ground for the sake of the prince. He felt his face blushing, but everyone felt that this stern-faced guard was so ruthless. Everyone raised their heads to look at Chi-Heiran, seeing that he was still standing steadily without saying a word, really waiting for Lu Ji to make a big gift. Their eyes suddenly became a little interested, and they watched with some interest. Although they have made friends with Lu Ji, they may not be good friends, because Lu Shi only came to Beijing at the end of last year, and everyone has known each other for only a few months. The reason why they got so close to Lu Ji is partly because of him. Half of his own talent is because of Lu Shi behind him. Lu Ji also raised his head and looked at Chi-Heiran in astonishment, but he quickly came back to his senses, kneeled down with a calm expression on his robe, and saluted. "Lu Ji, a grassroots man, has seen King Rong." Chi-Heiran asked with interest, "Are you the eldest son of Mrs. Lu?" "It's right down." Chi-Heiran sighed and said, "Mr. Lu is indeed talented. I heard that Mr. Lu can compose poetry at the age of 5, and can make art at the age of 8. He seemed to admire Lu Ji very much. But everyone looked at Lu Ji, who was still kneeling on the ground, and felt a little weird in their hearts. They didn't know how Lu Ji offended this bully. Lu Ji was also a little curious. He had heard about the great meritorious King Rong, his military talent, the emperor's love for him, and his domineering, but this was the first time seeing him. Lu Ji didn't think he had offended him. Chi-Heiran asked Lu Ji to kneel and listen to him rambling for a while, and then he mentioned his son's education, and said earnestly, "Mr. Lu is tall, but he must also pay attention to educating future generations. After that, if you can't teach it well, then it's better not to have it. It's the father's fault for raising him and not teaching him. Mr. Lu is very talented, but it seems that the responsibility of being a father has not been fulfilled." Chi-Heiran shook his head slightly, and said, "Mr. Lu can teach children well even if he spends only half of the time spent in tea houses talking about poetry." Everyone looked at Lu Ji with wonderful expressions on their faces, and Lu Ji's expression was also quite colorful. "How did he offend the prince?" Chi-Heiran asked people to get up after saying that he was happy, and left with his sleeves shaken. Everyone. "So this prince came here just to let them salute him, and then teach Lu Ji?" Everyone turned their heads to look at Lu Ji again in unison. Lu Ji twitched his mouth and clenched his fist to leave. He had to go back and ask his father what happened. It seemed that this matter was still related to Yan'er. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 705. Mrs. Lu couldn't help but patted the table, and said angrily, "Childish," but there was nothing he could do about Chi-Heiran. A glint flashed in his eyes. He could not do anything to Chi-Heiran on the surface, but he had too many ways to make Chi-Heiran he is uncomfortable. "Don't go out of the mansion these few days, lest Chi-Heiran grab you and humiliate you," said dissatisfied. "I let you go out of office a long time ago, but you didn't want to. Now it's all right. You are white, and seeing him you have to bow down." Lu Ji drank his tea with his head down, pretending that he didn't hear his father's words. He didn't like officialdom, and it was useless for his father to say more. Seeing him like this, Mrs. Lu was even more annoyed, but this son has always been stubborn, and he looks like he has no desires, and there is nothing he can do about him. When Chi-Heiran returned to Chi Mansion, Little Bear's mood had calmed down. He was sitting on the couch playing with toys, and when he heard the movement, he only looked up at his father, then lowered his head and continued to play with toys, unlike before rushing up to ask hug. Chi Heiran frowned slightly, turned his head and asked Mu Yangling, "Is he always like this?" Mu Yangling touched his head and said, "It's much better now. Just now, I didn't have much energy and didn't play with toys. I just nestled in my arms." Chi Heiran gritted his teeth, "Lushy, humph." Chi Heiran looked at Little Bear with hatred and said, "You accept what others say about you? How can you do big things after you can't even stand such a little setback? You dad, I was called a fool when I was young, but look, besides your uncle, who else in Daki is stronger than me, who dares to say that I am a fool?" Chi Heiran said, "Whoever dares to say that you are dumb or a fool in the future, you just beat him up, and Dad will take care of you if something goes wrong." With tears in his eyes, Little Bear said aggrievedly, "It's not dumb." Chi Heiran and Mu Yangling froze, and they looked at each other incredulously. The shock in their eyes was unmistakable. Chi Heiran couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva, squatted in front of the Little Bear and asked, "Son, what did you just say?" Little Bear was a little nervous, but he still said, "It's not dumb." Although the words were not clear, they did speak. Chi Heiran and Mu Yangling's eyes flashed with excitement. They held the Little Bear in their arms, and said softly, "Of course our Little Bear is not dumb, come on, call Daddy to listen." Xiao Xiang pursed his lips, looked at Chi Heiran for a long time, and then said slowly under the expectant eyes of his parents, "Daddy." The voice was a little vague, but the meaning could be heard. Chi Heiran laughed excitedly, picked up the Little Bear and threw it into the sky, caught it firmly and laughed loudly, "Good son." Then I was a little worried. The son didn't speak because he was awakening his talent. Now that he can speak, he didn't know if there was any problem with his body. Chi Heiran hastily ordered someone to call the imperial physician Wang, and then told Fei Bai to immediately go to the palace to invite more imperial physicians. Mu Yangling had already poured a glass of water for the Little Bear excitedly, and said, "Come on, my son moistens his throat." Little Bear took a sip and said vaguely, "Thank you." Mu Yangling was even happier, and kissed him on the cheek. "Son, call me mother." "Mother." Physician Wan quickly came over and examined the Little Bear 3 times, repeatedly saying that he had no problems at all, but he was able to talk. The other imperial physicians from the imperial hospital also arrived quickly, and came to the same conclusion as imperial physician Wang. Seeing the excitement of Rong Jun Wang and his wife, the imperial physicians kindly reminded them not to let the children talk too much at the first time, but to take it step by step. Raise your throat. Little Bear's speech is very vague now, and it takes people guessing to understand, but fortunately, he can speak words. As long as he keeps correcting him, he can catch up with other 3-year-old children. Little Xiang does not speak like other children. He spits out every single word. He is able to complete sentences from the very beginning. It can be seen that although he was unable to speak before, his language skills were not weak. Chi Heiran was very happy. That night he hugged the Little Bear to teach him to recognize people, let him call him once, and planned to take the child into the palace the next day. Mu Yangling stopped him. "Little Xiang only fights with others, it's better to keep a low profile." Chi Heiran was dissatisfied and said, "It's not Xiaoxiang's fault to fight, why should we keep a low profile? Master will take Xiaoxiang to the court meeting tomorrow, let him call those court officials, let them see if we Xiaoxiang are dumb." The imperial doctor said to tell Xiaoxiang to speak less. He can't even call his own family, why should he call outsiders? Chi Heiran heard the same thing, rolled his eyes and said, "The grievances suffered by the Little Bear can't be counted like this. After a while, the Little Bear can speak fluently before I take him out." Chi Heiran held the child Sai Mu Yangling in his arms, patted his buttocks and said, "I'll go after the imperial physician and tell them not to talk nonsense." Chi Heiran chased the imperial physician into the palace, and the imperial physician was reporting to Qi Xiaoyuan the physical condition of the little bear, which saved him trouble. Instead of asking the imperial physician, he directly asked Qi Xiaoyuan to give the order. Qi Xiaoyuan glanced at Qi Heiran, and then looked at the courtyard of the imperial hospital, who was kneeling below, and the courtyard was busy making sure that they would never speak out. Qi Xiaoyuan waved the courtyard to go down, then looked at Qi Heiran, and asked, "What do you want to do? I heard that you made Mrs. Lu so angry that you blocked Lu Ji." Qi Heiran curled his lips, "Just saying a few words to them will make you angry, so what if his grandson scolds little bear like that?" Qi Xiaoyuan tidied up his desk, and said, "It's almost enough. Teifu is not a very broad-minded person, and it's no good for you to annoy him." "Brother," Qi Heiran said with a frown, "since you know Mrs. Lu is not a very good person, why did you let him be the prince, and didn't you let him teach Xiaobao badly?" Qi Xiaoyuan snorted softly, "I asked him to be the prince and tutor, not to teach Xiaobao knowledge, nor to teach Xiaobao how to be a man, but to teach Xiaobao etiquette, to let Xiaobao know some tricks of the family. Xiaobao's knowledge is taught by others, but as for being a man, I am still alive." Qi Xiaoyuan appointed Fang Ziwen, a Hanlin scholar, as the prince's young tutor, and Xiaobao mainly studied with him. The prince's tutor is just an idle job, and the courses he comes to the palace to talk to Xiaobao every day have a limited scope and time limit. Compared with Teifu, Fang Ziwen is much younger, but his knowledge and character are first class. He used to be a student of Teifu Yan. Wearing hemp and filial piety for Teifu Yan, Qi Xiaoyuan admired Teifu Yan very much, and similarly, naturally he also admired Fang Ziwen very much. So when he chose teachers for Xiaobao, he didn't choose those already famous Confucian scholars, but chose Fang Ziwen, who was still a fifth-rank Hanlin, and directly made him a second-rank Shaofu, and let him study in the Ministry of Industry. Qi Xiaoyuan said, "Since the little bear can speak, he should be enlightened, so let's send the little bear to the palace and let the brothers study together." Qi Heiran hesitated, "I'm only 3 years old, isn't it too early?" He followed Fan Zijian back then, but he was only enlightened when he was 6 years old. Qi Xiaoyuan glared at him, and said, "Do you still think your son is you? I will give you 10 days to prepare, and immediately send him to the palace. While you are in the capital, let him be enlightened by a good gentleman. Find him another gentleman, and when you go to Canaan, bring him with you. Let me tell you, don't think about just teaching him martial arts. Even if the children and grandchildren of our Qi family can't be both civil and military, they can't be biased. Seriously, take a look at your notebook. Thankfully I was the one who reviewed it. If it was someone else, I'm afraid I'd laugh my ass off." Qi Heiran gave a severe lesson. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 706. After the quarrel between Rongjun Wangji and the princess left, he stopped Grand Tutor Lu for a quarrel, and then stopped Lu Ji to teach him a lesson. Everyone was keenly aware that this matter might have something to do with the Lu family, but they hadn't waited for everyone to inquire about it. After coming out, the Qi mansion invited a large number of imperial physicians from the palace, and after the imperial physicians came out, King Rong chased him to the palace. It is said that the palace was quiet, there was no sound at all, and he didn't know what the brothers said. Everyone was confused by Qi Heiran's series of actions, and they couldn't guess what happened at all. The imperial doctor may be someone in the mansion who is sick, or an important person. Visually, it may be the princess and the young prince, but what does it mean to find the Lu family unlucky? It seems that the Lu family and Rong Junwang have no intersection, right? And the family who also accompanied the eldest prince to study understood after the child was sent back. They were still worried, but seeing that Qi Heiran was only looking for trouble with Lu, they knew that he was only looking for trouble with the culprit. The emperor dotes on this younger brother, as long as it's not too much, he won't bother about it, and the king of Rongjun just makes Lu's a little clown, and doesn't embarrass him in political affairs. Most likely, the emperor won't care about it. Although these revenges are a little childish and not hurtful, they are also embarrassing, okay. So they kept silent, and only hoped that the king of Rongjun would not think of them, and then teach his children a lesson, so that he would stay away from the young son of the king's mansion of Rongjun in the future, not to mention that he was dumb. Although the youngest son of Rongjun Wangfu couldn't speak at the age of 3, he would be reincarnated if he couldn't stand it. He had a powerful and protective father. While there was constant speculation outside, Chi Heiran was very happy. He always held his head high when he came out and went in. The little bear could speak, and the stone hanging in his heart fell to the ground completely. For several days in a row, he beat Teifalu deliberately, and every time he would remind him to educate his children and grandchildren well, which made Teifalu very aggrieved. If the former one can bear it, but the latter one can't bear it no matter what, Chi Heiran seems to have a pair of eyes on Luji. As long as he goes out, Chi Heiran will appear in front of him and ask him to kneel down and salute him. This kind of humiliation was unbearable to Luji, who had always been gentle and polite, not to mention the always strong Mr. Lu. But they still can't say Chi Heiran, because Luji has no fame, so he would kneel down and salute Chi Heiran when he saw Chi Heiran, but the friends he made had either obtained fame or became officials in the court. There is a vacant position under the shade, so when you see Chi Heiran, all you need to do is stand up and bow to salute. Among the group of people, only Luji had to kneel down, and Luji, who has always considered himself unparalleled in beauty, couldn't help but doubt his own ability. Only then did Luji discover the disadvantages of not having fame. In the past, he looked down on Dazhu's filth, and he didn't even bother to use the favor of his family and father to become an official in the court, so naturally he didn't bother to take the imperial examination. Although he has no fame, no one asked him to kneel down to salute. In addition to meeting the emperor, even if he met the prince, he only needs to bow his hands and salute. Who would care about the eldest son of the Lu family? The future patriarch of the Lu family has no fame, so you have to kneel down and salute. The world has always been tolerant of the family. But they happened to meet a serious one. They didn't let Luji salute because they bought Lu's face, but now they meet someone who doesn't buy Lu's face, they can only admit it, because the law is still above the world. Chi Heiran tormented Luji for 3 or 4 days, causing Lu's reputation to drop to the lowest point. Friends who had made friends with Luji suddenly had a strange psychology when Luji knelt down and stood by himself. Lu's heirs don't seem to be doing very well, at least they can stand when he is kneeling. And what about the family? Do you have to submit to the imperial power? Just look at the previous Kui family, the current Lu family, how arrogant the family was in the past, and Emperor Jinjian wanted to invite the family to see him, and he had to see if the other party had time, but today, although he gave the head of the Lu family a first-rank crown prince, it is let the crown prince Shaofu enlighten the eldest prince, and only let Teifalu concurrently be a 4th-rank imperial supervisor. Neither of them has any rights, let alone other aristocratic families. There are no aristocratic children in important positions in the court. The Yan family is also among the small families, but Prime Minister Yan has been loyal to the present since he rehabilitated Teifu Yan and bestowed him with a posthumous title, regardless of the family's respect for the emperor. Therefore, before Chi Heiran realized it, his behavior strengthened the imperial power, and the influence of the aristocratic family dropped a lot. At this moment, Grand Tutor Lu and Luji also failed to foresee this consequence. They were simply angry at Chi Heiran's humiliation. Mrs. Lu said angrily, "How long is Chi Heiran going to fight? It's just a fight between children, why is he meddled by an adult? Uncle, can't we teach him a lesson? Your students are all over the court, and there will always be someone who can check and balance him. My nephew doesn't believe that he can be a clean leader," Lu Yuen shouted dissatisfied. During this period of time in the Imperial College, he was always being asked about this by his classmates. They were all asking how Lu Shi had offended King Rongjun. It was really annoying. God knows that his 6-year-old nephew just scolded Chi Heiran's son, and his nephew was almost beaten until his parents didn't even know each other. Who would they turn to for justice? Mrs. Lu remained silent. Lu Yuan stomped his feet. Uncle, why should our Lu family be so timid? If we don't fight back, I'm afraid that anyone will be able to ride on our Lu family's head in the future. Lu Ji glanced at him, and couldn't bear to look directly at his cousin's stupidity. With his father's kindness, he was able to bear it until now, mostly because he was controlled by others. Naturally, Mrs. Lu would not expose his shortcomings in front of his nephew, and after sending Lu Yuan away, he immediately looked at Lu Ji with a clear look. I asked you to become an official, but you just didn't listen. As long as you are obedient, you will definitely be obedient now that I have a place in the court. Do I need to be controlled by others like this? Lu Ji frowned. Father, do you have something to fall into Chi Heiran's hands? No, said Mrs. Lu with an ugly face, the handle is in today's hands. Speaking of Grand Tutor Lu, he became angry. He asked his followers to clean up the affairs of Qinzhen Palace. Only halfway through the wipe, he realized that the emperor had already taken advantage of him. He was afraid that Chi Heiran would use this to deal with him. They cut off their tails to survive, but found that today has no intention of using this excuse. It seems that as long as they don't fight back against Chi Heiran, today will not use these excuses. Otherwise, why would he need Chi Heiran to take revenge on them without any movement? Mrs. Lu rubbed his forehead, and said, I'm afraid that I don't want to tear up our face with our Lu today, so I bear it and don't say anything. In this case, we don't need to force him to take this step, but we can't just let him go if Chi Heiran continues like this. Tomorrow you will take Yaner to Chi's mansion to apologize. If Chi Heiran insists on this matter again, then he will have to take care of others. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 707. No, Lu Ji said with a frown. Yaner was at fault, but Chi Wenjin hit him too, and Chi Heiran also retaliated. It's okay to ask Yaner to apologize, but his son has to apologize to my son. Grand Tutor Lu pointed at Lu Ji and was speechless with anger. Do you think Chi Heiran will make his son apologize? Then wait, Lu Ji said in a deep voice, Father, the character of the aristocratic family cannot be lost. Yaner is my eldest son, and I will never let him be criticized. Grand Tutor Lu was very angry. Yaner is only 6 years old, and it's a trivial matter of children fighting. Who would get involved in the matter of character? Lu Ji snorted coldly, and looked at his father clearly. Taifu only felt that his face was burning, and said helplessly, Yaner is only 6 years old. He wanted to characterize this as a fight between children. Isn't it normal for children to quarrel and fight? If there are too many people talking about it, it's not a small child's fight. Anyway, I don't agree. Then you don't go out, Yan Taifu said, shaking his sleeves. If you don't go out, can Chi Heiran still come to your house to block you? After this period, you can go out to meet friends after the matter subsides. Lu Ji's face suddenly twitched, and he nodded unwillingly. What Lu Ji usually likes is going out to meet friends, and keeping him from going out is almost like killing him, but thinking of Chi Heiran always tossing him so painlessly, Lu Ji can only grit his teeth and agree. For 2 days in a row, Lu Ji stayed at home and did not go out. Chi Heiran did not bother him anymore. The people in Beijing who had been waiting to watch the excitement were slightly disappointed. Lu Ji didn't show up. Chi Heiran also stayed in Chi's mansion and didn't show up. It was much quieter here even with Grand Tutor Lu. Mrs. Lu breathed a sigh of relief, feeling that the world was finally quiet. Just when everyone thought the matter was over, the emperor asked someone to pack up the eldest prince's things and send him to the Qi mansion, and summoned the young prince to Fu Fangzaiwan, and asked him to come to the Qi mansion to teach the eldest prince in the future, and the eldest prince's companion you can study at home temporarily, and then enter the palace to study with the eldest prince after he enters the palace. The emperor's meddling was different from Qi Heiran's small fights. Everyone held their breaths and waited for his next step. Even Grand Tutor Lu was concerned, but the emperor only did one thing. Everyone, I can't help being a little confused. But Qi Ziyuan released what happened in Shanglinyuan in a timely manner, and everyone understood why King Rongjun suddenly targeted Lu Shi, and it turned out that he was standing up for his own son. They don't think Qi Heiran is too much if they push the other by themselves. If their only son is pointed at the nose and called a fool and dumb, they will also be angry. Everyone admires. It is always difficult to separate the public from the private. Nowadays, many officials' personal grievances will be related to public affairs, and they will also compete in political affairs. However, Qi Heiran's handling of public affairs and private affairs has won him a lot of praise, and even some secluded people, after hearing about it, the celebrities who did not leave, all moved the idea of becoming an official. King Rong can do this, as his elder brother, Qi Ziyuan, should be good. Qi Heiran, who knew nothing about all of this, was running across the yard with a child on his back. Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang held Qi Heiran's hair tightly, and the yard was filled with the giggling laughter of the two children. Xiaoxiang pointed to the left, shouted, "Over there, over there." Qi Heiran couldn't see the top of his head, and asked, "Which side is that over there?" Xiaobao patted his head and said, "To the left." Little Bear imitated his tongue and shouted, "Left, left." Okay, Qi Heiran ran to the left with 2 clicks, and the two children laughed happily. Mu Yangling brought out a plate of watermelon and waved to the 3 of them, "Come and eat the watermelon, don't play for now." Qi Heiran ran over with the 2 children on his back. Xiaobao's face was ruddy, and he asked Mu Yangling to wipe his sweat with his little face up. Little Bear has been driven crazy by Qi Heiran for the past 2 days. He resolutely refused to let Mu Yangling wipe it. He ran to find Qi Heiran and asked him to serve him. Qi Heiran glanced at Mu Yangling proudly, and took a towel to mess up his face. Mo threw it away and said, "Okay, let's go eat melon." Nai Shenzhen's voice followed, "Okay, let's go eat melons." Seeing this, Xiaobao became anxious, "Brother, wait for me." "Don't wait for brother, I'll be with daddy." Little Xiang said a long sentence in one breath. Qi Heiran was very happy, and smiled and taught him, "You are brothers, you should love each other, and you should wait for your brother to be together." Little Bear tilted his head and asked, "Is brother waiting for me too?" Xiaobao nodded fiercely, "I'll give you a share of all the good things I have." Only then was the little bear satisfied, and carefully picked out a plate of watermelons, and after repeated comparisons, he chose a medium-sized piece for Xiaobao, then the largest piece for his father, and the one that was flattering to him, and then picked it up from the plate. Li picked the smallest piece for his mother, and he hugged the rest together on the plate. Mu Yangling was stunned when he saw it, and asked, "Son, how much do you want to see your mother? You actually gave me the smallest one." Little Bear looked at the only 2 pieces of watermelon left on the plate, and said hesitantly, "I like to eat it." He turned sideways to block Mu Yangling's gaze, so he could only give 1 piece to his mother. Mu Yangling looked at the bigger piece on the plate and said, "You can give me a bigger piece." The little bear was so anxious that he was about to cry. He guarded the watermelon for a long time. Seeing his mother staring at him, he could only reluctantly give her a larger piece of watermelon, and watched her eat the watermelon eagerly. Up. Qi Heiran felt distressed immediately, and gave him the watermelon in his hand. "I'll give you this piece of daddy's." Mu Yangling originally thought that the little bear would happily take it, but who knew that the little bear shook his head, pushed the watermelon to his father, and said, "Daddy, eat it, daddy likes it." He even looked at his mouth and pushed it. Then he looked at his mother aggrieved, "Mother doesn't like it?" What he said was a little unclear, but Mu Yangling and Chi Heiran both understood it. Their hearts seemed to be bumped, sour, but sweet. Mu Yangling couldn't help hugging the little bear, smiling said, "Stupid boy, our family has more than one watermelon, there are many more, I will ask someone to bring you a big one." Little Xiong would hold everything he likes in his arms. When he sees something he likes on the street, he must hold it in his hand. He often asks them for those shiny gems, and if he doesn't give them, he will be distressed, not to mention that Chi Heiran loves him to the bone. Even if she couldn't bear to reject him, Mu Yangling was often worried that they spoiled him too much, raised his personality alone, and didn't know how to share it, but now it seems that she was thinking too much. Her son's love for things possessiveness is stronger, but it's not that they don't know how to be filial and share. He has a goal in mind. Before eating watermelon at home, Mu Yangling thought it was not sweet enough, so he didn't like it, but Chi Heiran loved the cool taste, and every time he came back, he ate the leftover watermelon. Little Bear thought that his mother didn't like it, so he gave her a small piece, but his father liked it, so he gave him the biggest one. Although he wanted to eat it himself, he didn't want to take his father's. There was a flash of water in Chi Heiran's eyes, he lowered his eyes and kissed his son's forehead, and said with a low laugh, "He is really my good son." Knowing that kissing means liking, Little Bear raised his head and kissed his father on the cheek. Xiaobao watched from the side, doubts flashed in his eyes. When the two brothers were alone, Xiaobao asked Xiao Xiong, "Why do you kiss your uncle?" Little Xiong said as it should, "If you like it, you should kiss it." Little Treasure bowed his head and stood silently on the side. When Little Bear saw him, he thought he was sad because no one kissed him, so he went up and hugged his head and kissed him on the forehead. Wiping his mouth, he said, "Brother, I like you." Xiaobao suddenly showed a big smile. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 708. Xiaobao peeked at Qi Ziyuan, and seeing his father concentrating on the book in his hand, he felt distressed. From the corner of Qi Ziyuan's eyes, he saw that his whole face was wrinkled, and he suddenly laughed. He put down the book and asked, "Xiaobao, do you have something to say to father?" Xiaobao's eyes lit up, and he hesitated a little. Finally, as if he had made up his mind, he climbed onto Qi Ziyuan's knee, held his head and kissed him on the cheek. The smile on Qi Ziyuan's face froze immediately. Seeing his son looking at him with some anxiety, he softened his facial expression as much as possible and asked, "Xiaobao, who taught you to do this?" Xiaobao said anxiously, "Uncle often kisses aunt and younger brother also kisses uncle." My younger brother said that kissing means liking. Xiaobao said with a slightly red face, "I like my mother, and I also like my father." Qi Ziyuan felt soft in his heart, but Chi Heiran was a little annoyed. This kid was too careless. He even let the child see and hear the inner curtain, and even said that he would kiss if he liked. Not only taught the little bear badly, but also taught him badly his son. Qi Ziyuan patted his son's head, thinking about how to educate him without making him feel that his parents didn't love him if they didn't kiss him. The way they express their feelings is only more subtle. Just as Qi Ziyuan was about to speak, Xiaobao counted with his fingers, "I like father and mother the most, so I kissed father and mother, then little bear, aunt and uncle, father, and Xiaobao will leave the palace tomorrow. I'm going to kiss little bear and aunt and uncle and tell them that little treasure likes them too." Qi Ziyuan swallowed all his words in an instant, and said with a smile, "Then tomorrow, my father will ask the guards to escort you out of the palace." Xiaobao nodded happily, and kissed Qi Ziyuan's face again. Qi Ziyuan was sweet in his heart, but secretly swore that he must get rid of his son's perception after tomorrow. It's too indecent to kiss each other up. Chi Heiran knew that something was wrong with Xiaobeo's saliva on his face. After careful questioning, he was sure that Xiaobeo had indeed kissed his elder brother. Chi Heiran felt as sad as if his father had died, and wanted to beat his feet and chest. "Little bear, you are talking nonsense with your brother, what?" Mu Yangling and the two children looked at him inexplicably. Chi Heiran stomped his feet. "Do you think elder brother is as enlightened as I am? How is it proper to kiss each other? These two boys are pushing me into the pit of fire." Then he hugged the two children and educated them. "We know that you are filial to your parents and love us. From now on, you can just settle down in the morning and evening, and you don't need to kiss to express it." Little Xiong was dissatisfied immediately. "Why can father kiss mother?" Before Chi Heiran could explain, Xiaobeo had already raised his little hand and said, "I know, this is the joy of Dunlun. Uncle and aunt are husband and wife, so they can kiss." Chi Heiran and Mu Yang were flustered and asked, "Who taught you?" Little Bear has already asked loudly, "What is the joy of London?" His voice was full of curiosity. But Xiaobeo didn't understand either, and shook his head in confusion. "I don't know either, it wasn't written in the book." Chi Heiran went crazy. "How old are you? What kind of books do you read?" Little Bear has already shouted, "Then I want to have fun with Daddy Dunlun too." Chi Heiran /U0026 Mu Yangling. "No," the couple spoke righteously. "Why?" The two curious babies stared over curiously with their big eyes. "Little treasure is smart and precocious. He and Fang Ziwen just learned knowing what you know, not knowing what you don't know, which popularized the idea of asking what you don't understand, and Xiao Xiong can only speak, chattering non-stop all day long. There are more questions, he doesn't care if the logic is smooth or not, once he doesn't understand, he just asks along." Therefore, when the two children asked one question after another, Chi Heiran and Mu Yangling couldn't answer at all, and then answered the nth question of the two children. Finally, he waved his hand impatiently, and roughly concluded, "In short, I can kiss your aunt, your father can kiss your mother, your father and I can kiss you and Xiao Xiong, and no one else can. You need to remember this, and when you grow up and understand everything you need to know, just forget about it." God knows how Chi Heiran felt when Xiaobeo nodded his finger to indicate the list of people he wanted to kiss. This kid actually wanted to kiss Yandu. What kind of kiss is there for that stern-faced person who owes him 300 taels of silver? Just because he once showed a smile to Xiaobeo? In order to prevent Daki's future crown prince and his nephew from doing things that he would regret for the rest of his life when he grows up, Chi Heiran decided to enforce the scope. Xiaobeo and Xiao Xiong were stunned for a moment and continued to ask questions. "But fourth uncle, can't auntie kiss us?" While talking, Xiaobeo said shyly, "Auntie hugged me and kissed me when I entered the door just now." Chi Heiran glared at Mu Yangling, and said, "You come and explain to him, or you won't be allowed to kiss them again in the future." He was almost driven crazy by the children's question after question. Mu Yangling tilted his head and thought about it, and said sincerely, "Little bear, my aunt and uncle don't understand many questions, so you need to explore them. When you grow up, you will always find the answer to the question. If you can't find it, you can record it so that future generations can continue to look for it." Xiao Bao tilted his head and asked, "So now uncle and aunt can't answer our questions, can they?" Mu Yangling nodded, "Yes, maybe when you grow up a bit, you will be able to find the answer yourself." I know. Little Bear raised his little hand and said, "Is it watermelon or muskmelon that tastes better? After I eat it, I know it's watermelon that tastes better." Mu Yangling twitched the corners of his mouth, nodded and said, "That's almost what it means, but Bear, you think watermelon is delicious, it's just your feeling. If other people like to eat cantaloupe, they will think that cantaloupe is more delicious. This is a personal preference. The problem is that each has its own answer, and we cannot insist on unity." Both Xiaobeo and Xiao Xiong seemed to understand, but they kept it in their hearts. As Mu Yangling said, they will understand one day. Seeing that the two children finally stopped asking questions, Qi Heiran heaved a sigh of relief, and whispered to Mu Yangling, "Why didn't you say that earlier? They have been tortured for so long for nothing." Mu Yangling also whispered, "I just thought of it." Qi Heiran sighed, "Sure enough, if there is no pressure, there will be no motivation. If I knew it earlier, I would leave all the problems to you, so you would have thought of these words earlier." Qi Heiran patted his buttocks and stood up, saying, "Leave these two children to you, I will go to the palace to plead guilty with my elder brother." Mu Yangling was at a loss, "What's the crime?" Qi Heiran was indignant, "Please be guilty of being tricked by your son. Xiaobao is the crown prince, can he have relatives casually? See what your son has taught him. Our family kisses behind closed doors, and we have to expand our circle, developed friendship, and developed it to the palace. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 709. Qi Heiran was punished by Qi Xiaoyuan to copy the Book of Rites 100 times, no matter how much he begged, it was useless. Qi Xiaoyuan is not good at managing his younger brother's inner affairs, he can only make him remember through such things. Beating and scolding are useless, this kid can forget when he turns around, so he can only be punished for copying books. Qi Heiran was indignant, and muttered, "You have kissed Xiaobao and Bear before, so why are you right?" Qi Xiaoyuan glanced at him, could it be the same? At that time, the two children were like small balls, and they didn't remember anything. When he saw the child for the first time, he showed his love for the child out of excitement. Who would have seen him before kissing again? Two children? What's more, parents' own children are very different from children's parents, okay. Qi Xiaoyuan still can't accept this point, as long as he thinks that he is getting old and the grown-up little treasure kisses his forehead, he will get goosebumps all over his body. Qi Heiran held a copy of Book of Rites in grief and anger and went back to ground his feet. In Qi Xiaoyuan's words, "You have only been in Beijing for a few days and the city is full of wind and rain. Anyway, you just returned to Beijing to participate in the banquet for the canonization of the crown prince and the vassal state of Dali. You don't need to attend the court meeting, you can copy your books at home during this time, please be quiet for me." Qi Heiran didn't think there was anything wrong with being grounded at first, but after hearing what he said, he suddenly remembered that his plan for the Lu family was only half implemented, and he hadn't brought his talking son out to show off yet. Qi Heiran knew what Qi Heiran was thinking, and Qi Xiaoyuan knew everything in his heart. He glared at him and said, "Restrain yourself a bit, Xiaobao will return to the palace tomorrow, and his companion will also enter the palace. Recently, take the little bear and stay at home honestly, don't let him offend others, little bear is still young, he has to grow up, there is still a long way to go." Qi Heiran's face turned cold, "Do they dare to attack the son?" Qi Xiaoyuan snorted coldly, and didn't tell him how many times Xiaobao had been assassinated in the past year, otherwise he wouldn't have defended the palace like an iron bucket, without leaking anything. Those who are staring at Xiaobao are not only those families who are interested in succession and want mothers to rely on their sons, but also those who are left over from the previous dynasty and miss the glory of the previous dynasty infinitely. They cut down the maids and servants, released a large number of maids to go home for marriage, and dispatched a large number of servants to Huangzhuang and other courtyards, just to take the opportunity to select those suspicious people. The fewer people, the easier it is to manage. The Shanglai incident this time is a manifestation. He didn't want people outside to know what happened, so he could hide it for 2 days. Compared with the sieve-like harem of the previous dynasty, this is not bad. But it was only kept a secret for 2 days. Qi Xiaoyuan was very dissatisfied with this. When he was not absolutely sure to protect his family, Qi Xiaoyuan was unwilling to push Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang, who were the least protective, to the front. Everyone's focus, and then we need something to distract everyone. So when Chi Heiran went back to copy the book, he also included a thinking task, to think of a way to divert everyone's attention from Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang, and he didn't mind what happened to Chi Heiran. What Mu Yangling saw was Chi Heiran who was holding a book and meditating. Not only Mu Yangling was surprised, but Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang's eyes widened in surprise. Although they are small, they also know that daddy, uncle, hates reading the most in his life, and it is book of rights that can make people fall asleep after reading it. The book, shouldn't it burn out the brain? The two children only thought about it in their hearts, but Mu Yangling touched his forehead directly, and turned to the two children, "It's not burned." Chi Heiran patted Mu Yangling's hand, and glared at her angrily, "I won't allow you to forge ahead. I don't like reading because you don't persuade me. Whoever is not the wife who persuades the husband to study hard is you. Mu, you always ask me to take you out to play, and I told you to waste my time." Chi Heiran talked eloquently, and Mu Yangling turned around to teach the two children, "Did you hear that? Your uncle is personally teaching you why you are shirking responsibility. You must not be such people in the future, you know." Chi Heiran choked, but facing the shining eyes of the two children, Chi Heiran could only swallow his words. Mu Yangling took the opportunity to pull the two children and said, "In addition to understanding, learning depends on diligence and self-control. You must be conscious. Others can't suppress you. Even if you can force you to sit at the desk, the heart is not there either, it's just a waste of time. Just like what your uncle said just now, some people are not determined, but they like to shirk their responsibilities. They don't study, but they don't want to take this responsibility, so they try to push it to others. If others press him to study, he couldn't read it, and he had another excuse to shirk his responsibility." The little bear is still young, looking at his mother with confused eyes. Xiaobao Zai said thoughtfully, "My nephew understands, whether you learn or not is up to you. If you want to learn, you can sit still even if others lead you to play. If you don't want to learn, it is because others force you to play. You are sitting, and your heart is not on the books, but no matter whether you study or not, you should have the courage to take responsibility instead of pushing it on others." Not only Mu Yangling, but also Chi Heiran looked at Xiaobao in surprise. He didn't expect Xiaobao to realize this. Chi Heiran touched his head with a sigh and said, "This kid is really like a big brother." The big brother knew how to arrange his own future when he was young. He dared to write letters to his uncles privately when he was only 8 years old, asking them to find a martial arts master for him, convinced my uncles with my own plans for the future. Chi Heiran remembered that once his uncle mentioned that what shocked and moved him the most at that time was that it contained not only Chi Xiaoyuan's life plan for himself, but also for him. The uncle said that although these arrangements were still a little immature, they were all achievable, and they were good arrangements for them at the time. If it weren't for the elder brother's age, the uncle would almost suspect that it was proposed by an adult. Chi Heiran feels that Xiaobao's brain is completely inherited from his elder brother, and the elder brother can be regarded as a successor, and Daki can have this heir. As long as Xiaobao doesn't grow crooked in the future, Daki's century-old foundation will be fine. But Xiaobao looked at his uncle Tangled, and asked, "Isn't uncle that kind of villain who always shirks responsibility?" "But uncle is obviously a general." Chi Heiran's face froze. Mu Yangling hurriedly said, "Your uncle did that to educate you, so that you can more intuitively know how annoying this kind of person is. Your uncle is a general. How can a person who can shirk his responsibility become a general? It is his ability to win a battle, and it is the fault of his subordinates if he loses a battle. It doesn't need to be too much, just once, and the people below are still willing to listen to him order." Xiao Bao shook his head. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 710. Mu Yangling laughed and said, "So your uncle is not that kind of person. Have you ever seen him shirk responsibility in a serious matter?" She also likes to play around with her, and if you give him good things, he will yell that you are used to him not being able to live a hard life in the future. Is your master the kind of person who can't bear hardships and stand hard work? Give him ordinary things, and he will yell that he doesn't love him, doesn't have him in his heart, and only thinks about bears all day long, sometimes like a child. It's okay to say such things in front of the older children. The older children understand everything. They only think that the elders are acting like a baby, and they don't take it seriously. But the children will remember it in their hearts, and they will follow suit. It is difficult to change. Xiao Bao's eyes sparkled and said, I know, this is what Mr. said is the method of trying to teach by example and rebutting. Mu Yangling felt that if the child grew up a little bit, she would not be able to educate her. How big is this? Looking at her ignorant son, she felt that this was normal. While Mu Yangling was still sighing, Qi Heiran's heart stopped beating, and he nodded and admitted without blushing, that's right, Uncle is going to perform in person to show you how annoying people who have no self-control and shirk their responsibilities are. Xiaobao exclaimed, Uncle is so powerful, I believed it just now, and I was thinking why Uncle blames Aunt for everything. Obviously Uncle himself doesn't like reading, so it's all just pretending. Uncle acted like it. Mu Yangling laughed out loud. This brat? Even if Qi Heiran's face was thick enough, he couldn't help but blush. If it wasn't for the surprise on Xiaobao's face, he would be sure that this kid was deliberately mocking him. Qi Heiran glared at Mu Yangling, and waved his hands like chasing flies. Go out, the master is going to write a booklet, take the child to play in the garden. Xiaobao, you are going back to the palace tomorrow, you are not allowed to thinking about going out to play. Xiaobao, who was still very excited at first, wanted to take his uncle to have an intimate performance exchange, suddenly froze. He pulled Xiaoxiang sullenly and said, Uncle, can I go out of the palace to see my brother in my spare time? Qi Heiran glanced at him condescendingly and said, is there enough spare time for you to walk from Shanglin Garden to the gate of the palace? Little Treasure blushed, and whispered cautiously, what about the rest time? Ask your father, he will agree. Xiao Bao cheered in a low voice, and said again, then can my younger brother come to see me in the palace? Little Xiang also looked at his father eagerly, took Xiaobao's hand and said, I want to play with my brother. Qi Heiran was able to refuse Xiaobao, but he couldn't bear to refuse his own son. He hesitated for a while, and said, but daddy has to retreat for some lessons recently, so he can't bring you into the palace. Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang turned their eyes to Mu Yangling in unison. Mu Yangling glared at Qi Heiran. Obviously he was grounded to copy books, and even lied to the child, but Mu Yangling didn't want to expose Qi Heiran in front of the two children, so he nodded with a smile, okay, no problem, as long as you have time, I will bring the little bear into the palace. The two brothers cheered, and ran out holding hands, and the laughter of the two children could be heard from a distance. Brother, I can teach you to read and write. The little bear shouted, brother, I will fight for you. Qi Heiran twitched his lips, turned his head and said to Mu Yangling, little bear can also talk, it's time to enlighten him. The eldest brother said that he will find a good husband for him, we will also prepare here, teach the child some basics first. We can't every time Xiaobao tells him to read and write, he just says he helps fight. Mu Yangling walked to the desk and picked up the book of rights on the table and said, who is to blame? Who is whispering in his son's ear every day that he will be a general when he grows up? Qi Heiran, let me tell you, what your son wants to do in the future depends on his personal interests, you are not allowed to force him, and when did I delay your study? Holding the book in his hand tilted his head and asked, have you ever studied? Qi Heiran blushed, stepped forward, grabbed the book and threw it on the table, and hugged him, why not, if you didn't always delay my master's time, would my master have no time to read? Mu Yangling rolled his eyes, you can read Book of Rights in your studies. How did I hear that someone was grounded to copy books? Chi Heiran yelled, who said that? Let him stand up and dare to spread rumors. Let's see if I don't punish him. Mu Yangling said slowly, it's the Empress who said it. The Empress sent someone to send me a message, saying that the eldest brother is letting you avoid the limelight, telling me not to hold you, as long as you don't leave the house, you can do it 100 times. Book of Rights as long as you write the first 20 or 30 times, but I think you have a lot of time, anyway, Xiaoxiang, and I don't intend to take up your time, so you should copy it by yourself for 100 times. Chi Heiran froze on the spot. After all, Mu Yangling was reluctant to leave Chi Heiran alone in the study to copy the books. After putting the two children to sleep at night, he took out a pen and ink to copy according to Chi Heiran's handwriting. Chi Heiran shook his head happily, and said arrogantly, I didn't ask you to copy it for me, but you wanted to copy it yourself. Mu Yangling stretched his legs towards him. Chi Heiran jumped away immediately. Mu Yangling sneered, and said, if you talk too much, I really won't copy it. Chi Heiran immediately shut up, and continued to write quietly on his stomach, but after being quiet for less than a quarter of an hour, he began to pick on Mu Yangling's handwriting again. This doesn't look like my handwriting, it's so soft, you've been drawing it for so many years, why is it still not like it? Mu Yangling said indifferently, anyway, it's for the elder brother to see, as long as it looks like it, you can copy it and I will copy it directly in lowercase. Chi Heiran immediately shut up. He learned Willow script, and the lower script is mostly learned by women, so don't he hand in a copy mixed with a bunch of lower script, so it won't make the elder brother mad. Although Book of Rights is a book, it is actually not very thick. Although it does not divide into sentences, and it is an ancient language, it is difficult to understand, but in fact, it is quite fast to read it word by word. But Chi Heiran couldn't see her eyes and she couldn't copy her heart. She read every sentence she copied. Mu Yangling listened and took a copy of Book of Rights to break the sentence on it. In this way, the copying time will be faster. After helping Chi Heiran to copy it 100 times, Mu Yangling found that she had memorized all the contents of Book of Rights. Sure enough, copying is the best way to remember. Mu Yangling felt that within 3 days, she will never forget the content of Book of Rights. As for 3 days later, it would be good if Mu Yangling could remember a few classic lines in it. While the couple were working together to copy the books, Xiaobao moved back to the palace, and Qi Xiaoyuan sent someone to connect Xiaobao's companions to the palace, and made a new arrangement for their courses. And this move caused an uproar in the court, because originally the eldest prince had 8 accompanying students, but this time the emperor only accepted 4 into the palace, and the remaining 4 emperors rewarded them and ordered them to arrange their own study. There is no need to enter the palace to study with, and at the same time, the first rule of the prince's companion is also out. Each prince can only have 4 companions, and the prince is treated the same as all the princes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 711. The reason why there was such an uproar was because the identities of the 4 eliminated accompanying readers were not simple, and the remaining ones were also very subtle. At the beginning, when the eldest prince chose to study with him, the aristocratic family took up 3 of the 8 places. 2 were the grandsons of generals, the other was the eldest grandson of Xiaofu Fang Ziwen, and the remaining 2 were Rongxian's youngest son, and 1 he is the youngest son of Song Yan, the minister of the Ministry of Household Affairs. Song Yan is from a poor family, and his skills are particularly good. Before that, he had been doing odd jobs under the Ministry of Household Affairs. Qi Xiaoyuan transferred Zhang Cheng to the Minister of Industry and promoted him by leapfrogging him. Making steady progress. Among the 4 people left behind, one is Fang Tong, the eldest grandson of Prince Fu Fangzaiwen, Rongzhen, the youngest son of Rongxian, Songqiao, the youngest son of Song Yan, and Huanan, the direct grandson of General Hua Taiwei. None of the children left. Someone suggested that Rongxian was from an aristocratic family. Everyone couldn't help laughing. Stop joking. Rongxian came from a side branch of the Rong family. He was squeezed out by his stepmother and thrown into the army since he was a child. He has never been educated by an aristocratic family. Except for his weak blood, the aristocratic family can't find anything in him. It is not because of his aristocratic identity that he is today, but because he and Qi Ziyuan have gone through hardships and fought together, so this person can be ignored. So, the emperor still doesn't like the family. So taking advantage of the Shanglinyuan incident to wipe out all the companions from the aristocratic family, Qi Ziyuan didn't let his courtiers guess too much. He paid them to work, not to guess his mind. If he has that time, he might as well think about how to persuade farmers to teach mulberry, how to better carry out water conservancy project construction, and increase national income. Woolen cloth. So he directly asked people to release the performance of everyone in Shanglinyuan that day, and he asked people to spread what he said to the queen. Although you young gentlemen are still young, you can't determine them based on this alone whether the product is good or bad, but when it comes to the crown prince and the foundation of Daki, one must be cautious. Lu Yan is the oldest among the 8, with the best talent and the most proud. He comes from a family, even if he is a little proud, I can bear it. The first prince follows him. Knowing that he is the youngest son of King Rongjun, he dares to show his talent and compose satirical poems in front of the eldest prince. This person is either arrogant enough to think that everyone can't understand him, or he has bad character. No matter what kind, I don't care. The eldest prince is allowed to have friendship with him when he is young and his mind is uncertain. As for Wang and Zheng's 2 children, the emperor shook his head slightly. Wang has always been on good terms with Lu, and Wang Yang grew up with Lu Yan even more. If you warn Lu Yan, the subsequent fight will not happen. As for Zheng Quan, the emperor said with a chuckle, that kid in South China is only 4 years old. Fang Ziwen taught him 18 times the 3-character classic and he still couldn't understand it. How could he understand Lu Yan's impromptu poem? I don't care. What is the conflict between the Lu family and the Zheng family? If you dare to use my children from the Qi family, let's bypass this battle because of Zheng Quan's young age. Next time, I will not be merciful. But a childish heart, pure kindness and virtue, let him stay. Among the 8 people, Fang Tong has always been cautious. He is also 6 years old, only 2 months younger than Lu Yan. He has always been the youngest in the family, and he is willing to act like an adult because he can easily study with a group of children younger than him. To take care of them. When Lu Yan read a poem to satirize Little Bear, he stopped him. What really made Qi Ziyuan amused was that when Little Bear hit Lu Yan, he didn't let Little Bear stop, but rushed forward to help Little Bear hold Lu Yan down. And said in his mouth, I told you to bully the little one, you will be beaten up, and you are not allowed to bully the little one in the future. This is also the reason why Qi Ziyuan clicked on him first when he clicked on the 4 companions. Of course, it's good for Qi Ziyuan to know about such trivial matters. He didn't let others spread the reputation of being a bad kid, but just spread the word that he stopped Lu Yan at the first time. Because of the relationship between Rongxian and Qi Ziyuan, Rongzhen was often brought to the palace to play, and he was one of Xiao Bao's rare playmates, so when Xiao Bao rushed up to stop others, he also rushed up. He could also tell the difference between his own people and others, and while holding Lu Yan and his group, he also helped Xiao Xiong pinch them, so he also fell down in the scuffle. Song Qiao was much more interesting. This kid was indoctrinated by his father to be loyal to the emperor when he entered the palace, so he stood in front of Xiao Bao when he started to fight. Seeing that Xiao Bao was protecting the bear, he blocked the fist for the bear instead. So he was the one who was injured the most by not moving a hand among the 8 people. The reason why Dai Jin, the grandson of Dai Wei, was excluded is much simpler. This kid has always been afraid that the world will not be chaotic. At that time, when there was a fight, he would yell at the side. He beat him all the time, and Xiaobao almost got punched by him a few times, but Song Qiao blocked them all. Dai Wei is considered a fierce general in leading the army and has a good brain. Back then, he insisted on using connections to send his grandson to the palace to be accompanied by the eldest prince. He is gone. Qi Ziyuan took this opportunity to determine the number of permanent companions for the prince in the future, so Dai Jing could only be excluded. Song Yan's youngest son was sent home, and Song Yan went to Dai Wei to settle the score. As soon as the emperor said to reset the number of accompanying readers, he knew that his grandson was hopeless. Not to mention the eldest prince, even if he chooses a companion for his grandson, he would not ask his grandson to fear that the world will not be chaotic, so Dai Wei is not unconvinced, but he can't help but glaring at Mrs. Lu. Well, this hidden attribute of his grandson may not be discovered by others, maybe he will learn it after staying with the eldest prince for a long time. It took him a lot of effort to get his grandson to follow him in as a companion, but now he was sent back to the past when something happened. However, no matter how dissatisfied Mr. Lu was, he had no choice but to quiet down when there was no one in the court to support him. Even the students who had always respected him did not stand by his side. There are indeed conflicts of interest between the court and China, but Qi Ziyuan's words moved everyone. It involves the foundation of the great Qi, so we have to be cautious. Anyone who is a minister wants to make the country rich and the people strong, and leave his name in history, and to achieve these two, a wise ruler is the most important prerequisite. They would not allow people like Lu Yan and Zheng Quan to appear next to the future prince, so for the first time they remained silent and supportive of the accompanying candidates selected by the emperor, which made Taifa Lu's full calculations come to nothing. Only then did he know that this was Qi Heiran's greatest revenge on them, but he still had a handle in the hands of the emperor, and he couldn't resist at all, otherwise, he would only attack Qi Heiran, and the emperor might implement it immediately. He was charged with the crime of inspecting Qinzhen Palace. With the Shanglai Yuan incident before, Lu's reputation plummeted. Once this incident broke out, the emperor might take the opportunity to weaken Lu's, just like he did with Kui. As the patriarch of the Lu family, Grand Tutor Lu did not dare to gamble, so he remained silent. So far, the Shanglai Yuan incident has come to an end. However, as aristocratic families, the prestige of the Lu family, Wang family, and Zheng family has been affected to a certain extent, and cracks have appeared in the alliance formed by the 3 families. The 3 families complained to each other in private. Although they knew that the emperor's words had ulterior motives, what he said it's all true. The alliance relationship among the 3 families has become the weakest because of the 3 children. Although there is no hostility, the alliance of aristocratic families against the imperial power has become an empty thing. Qi Ziyuan suddenly felt a lot more relaxed as the aristocratic family went their own way. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 712. The Shanglai Yuan incident ended and Qi Heiran won a big victory. Everyone was waiting for Qi Heiran to come out to show off. With Qi Heiran's character, he had to walk around in front of Grand Tutor Lu a few times to show his eyes, but Qi Heiran hadn't been seen in the court meeting for 2 days figure. And Mrs. Lu even asked for 2 days of sick leave, and kept his son Lu Ji at home so as not to be caught and humiliated by Qi Heiran. It was only later that I found out that Qi Heiran had ordered the emperor to restrain his feet for copying books. All ministers /U0026 Grand Tutor Lu, sure enough, why didn't this guy show up, so he was locked up. Mrs. Lu went to court with peace of mind, and Lu Ji was like a bird out of the cage, wishing to stay outside and not go home. Mrs. Lu cried so much that her eyes were almost blind. Seeing Lu Ji caring about her son, who knows that the good times will not come long, the son finally lost his status as the eldest prince's companion, and the husband also reverted to his old ways. Chi Heiran didn't know these things. He was holding the pen holder in distress, angrily. Obviously I have copied it 100 times, but the eldest brother still hasn't lifted the restraint. He wants to lock me up and just say, at worst, I will close the door and teach Xiao Xiang recognize the characters. Why do you have to copy them all over again? Fan Zijin was making tea, and without raising his head when he heard the words, he asked, did you write that 100 times by yourself? You don't feel ashamed when you say it? The big cousin didn't let you out because he was afraid that you couldn't help but get angry with me. Mrs. Lu confronted again. The elder cousin has already forced Mrs. Lu to retreat every step of the way. If you do it again and accidentally angered Mrs. Lu, he will really be angry and attack. Even if we suppress Mrs. Lu, it will hurt muscles and bones. I have the same opinion as big cousin. Anyway, we have plenty of time. We just have to work it out slowly, and one day the officialdom will no longer be distinguished from those of aristocratic and poor families. Fan Zijin smiled and said, in short, just copy slowly. I guess you should be grounded when the Dali envoys arrive. You are familiar with the Dali prince. Most of the errands for receiving the Dali envoys will fall on you. Chi Heiran rolled his eyes when he heard this, and asked, where is the Dali envoy now? Fan Zijin glanced at him, and said with a half-smile, I just received the news that I have passed Nanan County. Chi Heiran threw away the writing brush in his hand, and said happily, I passed Nanan County a while ago, so they are crawling by snails, and they should be there in 2 days. Even if I grow wind claws, I can't copy it 100 times, forget it, don't copy it. Fan Zijin twitched his mouth. He knew he would say that. Anyway, the original intention of the big cousin was not to let him copy the book, but to let him stay at home to hide from the limelight and keep a low profile, but he couldn't be so obvious and perfunctory. Big cousin, it's easy to talk there, but it's not easy to fool the courtiers. If people know that he hasn't even handed in the manuscript, there will inevitably be rumors about the censor. So I reminded, big cousin typed back what you copied. Chi Heiran's eyes lit up, he touched his chin, and said, then you can help me and ask if the elder brother can do this. Just say that the little bear is practicing speaking these days, because I have to copy books. I don't have enough time to see the children every day for half an hour. It was not like this at the busiest time in Qianan before, said pitifully. Fan Zijin twitched the corner of his mouth and nodded in response. Chi Ziyuan's answer was only one word, get lost. Chi Heiran happily went to play with the little bear, and put away the 5 copies he had copied in the past 2 days for Mu Yangling, and planned to hand them in at that time. Little bear learns to speak very quickly. It seems that as long as he passes the level where he speaks, everything will follow. Now he can jump out into sentences. Although it is not as good as when Xiaobao was 3 years old, he is no better than ordinary 3-year-olds. Worse. Mu Yangling always thought that it was good for the child to be healthy and happy, and he didn't want him to be a genius, but Chi Heiran felt that his son was already a genius. Where can Quan Daki find a second child prodigy who can speak long sentences fluently within 10 days and is also extremely powerful? Especially when this child prodigy was only 3 years old and defeated 4 older children 1 against 4. In order to show that his son is the only child prodigy, Chi Heiran even beckoned for a guard to feed him and the little bear. The guards. Mu Yangling watched with interest, and also wanted to know how strong her son is now, but she was more inclined to experiment with dead objects, such as stones. Seeing the guard standing still, Chi Heiran didn't want him to beat his son, so he turned his head and said to his son, pick him up and throw him out. Little Xiang stared at him, and ran up to the guard, just at the base of his thigh. The guard looked down at him, twitched his mouth, and was thinking about lying down and surrendering, when he saw Xiao Shi's small hands grabbing him. Waist, was thrown out in a whirl. The guard subconsciously flew in the air in shock, landed smoothly, and looked up at Xiaoxizi in surprise. Little Xiong pursed his lips, looked at his father sullenly, and said, "Too short." Mu Yangling hurriedly said, "You're not short anymore, you see that you are taller than ordinary children. Brother Xiaobao is 1 year older than you, but you see he is a head shorter than you." No matter how high Mu Yangling was, he would suspect that the little bear had gigantism. Qi Heiran was also very satisfied with his son's height. He picked up his son, and said seriously, "You have already thrown him out, but he didn't fall to the ground. Do you know why?" Little bear shook his head in confusion. "Because he knows light work, he knows kung fu. Son, you have to remember that you are born with great strength, but you are not invincible. In this world, many congenital deficiencies can be made up for by acquired efforts, and no matter how good the congenital, if you don't get reasonable training the day after tomorrow, you will fall behind others, and your innate advantages will not be worth mentioning in front of people who work hard the day after tomorrow." Seeing that Xiao Xiong half understood and half understood, Qi Heiran pointed to Mu Yangling and said, "For example, your mother and your mother is born with supernatural power, which is stronger than you, but she has little martial arts training and only a little internal strength. Daddy and you have been practicing martial arts since you were young. If you were young, your father would definitely not be able to beat your mother. When we were young, we were evenly matched, but now, your mother can't beat me at all. Why do you say?" Little Bear's eyes lit up, and he shouted, "Because Daddy has practiced martial arts." Little Bear shouted excitedly, "I want to practice martial arts too." Qi Heiran smiled happily, "You are my son Qi Heiran, of course you have to practice martial arts, but Kung Fu is not so easy to practice. Once you start, you can't stop and retreat." Little Bear nodded again and again, looking at Qi Heiran with shining eyes, as if he had seen that he could fly from tree to tree like his father. Qi Heiran patted his head in satisfaction and said, "Since this is the case, it's better to hit the sun today. From tomorrow onwards, you have to get up and stride, and start laying the foundation." Mu Yangling hurriedly said, "He's only 3 years old." Qi Heiran said, "I also started to practice martial arts when I was 3 years old. At that time, there were no parents to supervise me, and everything depended on self-consciousness. Didn't I still practice?" Qi Heiran seldom accomplishes anything because he seldom sets a goal, and once he sets a goal, he can keep going. No matter how young he is, his mind is like this. This is the benefit of a single muscle up. Little Xiong also patted his chest and assured his mother that he would persevere and resolutely carry forward the spirit of not being afraid of hardship or tiredness. Mu Yangling thinks that her husband and son are so active, she can't always discourage their enthusiasm, she can only accept it, and then expresses that she will provide logistical support. Soup, water, and wound medicine must be ready.